He kind of blends the line between good and evil. He definitely has a morality in his films, but he is very good at showing the humanity in his antagonists and showing flaws in his protagonists in unique ways. Hey everybody, my name is Nick. I'm a director and editor living in Taiwan for the moment. And today, I want to talk about the director Hayao Miyazaki. I'm sure many of you are familiar with him and his work. A lot of his films are extremely popular, extremely famous. And he is a director that I would consider one of the greats of all time. So today, I'm going to do a ranking of all of his films. Now I know tier lists are kind of like a popular thing now, and I decided to go with rankings of his films and not tier lists, because if I were to do a tier list, I think I might just put them all in S tier because they're all so good, and the differences between which one is better and which one is best is very minute, but I think there is a little bit of a hierarchy of his films that I want to go through. So this is my personal ranking of Miyazaki's films. I've seen all of them. All of his films are amazing and I love every single one. By no means are the ones that I put lower in the list bad films. I don't think he's made a bad film. So that's just something to keep in mind. You know, please write a comment if you think I ranked a film in the wrong place. I would love to hear your guys' ranking. Let me know what you think in the comments, obviously. Some of the hallmarks of a Miyazaki film. He is a director that I think is really truly an auteur. He has a lot of things that continually reoccur throughout his films. You can watch or see a clip from a film and know immediately that this is a Miyazaki film. He often plays with similar themes. Anti-war, he is a pacifist through and through. Very pro-ecological, he is an environmentalist as well. He's pro-family. I think another thing that he does really well is he kind of blends the line between good and evil. He definitely has a morality in his films, but he is very good at showing the humanity in his antagonists and showing flaws in his protagonists in unique ways. He shows the motivations of evil, and yet he doesn't apologize for them. This is why these films are so great to show children, because he does teach what is right and what is wrong, but he also teaches empathy, which I think is really beautiful. You know, some of the stylistic things that he does as an auteur would be obviously flight and flying scenes. That is something that he clearly loves and always tries to put into his work. So he animates flying and flight very well. Another thing would be trips and stumbles. This is something that I, upon watching his films, rewatching his films for this review, really noticed is that he is so good at animating somebody falling over and like stumbling and like clumsiness and things clanking around. It's just really fun to watch him when he gets into the zone with like a character like tumbling down the stairs or whatever. Yeah, so those are just some of the things. If there's anything that you notice that is uniquely Miyazakian, please let me know in the comments. And let's get into the rankings. Number 11, Ponyo. So this film tells the story of Ponyo, a goldfish who escapes from the ocean and is helped by a 5-year-old human boy named Sosuke. And the conflict of the film is Ponyo basically trying to escape the ocean and wanting to become a human, but it creates a lot of ecological turmoil in the world because the balance of the universe is kind of unsettled by the fact that Ponyo wants to become a human. This is a cute little film with a very ecological message, but it does feel a little bit disjointed, which is why I put it at number 11. One reviewer called it, and I think this is very astute, a chaotic and exuberant story as if it was told by a hyperactive toddler. And I think that is exactly what this movie is like. It's like a story that's told by a kid where he's like, and then this happens, and then there's a big tugboat and it gets really big, and Ponyo makes the tugboat big, and then the tugboat becomes little again because Ponyo's tired and she needs to take a nap. Like that's how the movie chugs along. And that's not really a knock against it. I think that it makes it really fun. And as far as children's films go, I think that matches for them. You know, I think a kid is gonna get a lot out of this movie. It's just very sweet, very wholesome. My favorite scene is something that I mentioned. I love the humanistic moments that Miyazaki puts in his film. So my favorite scene is this scene where they're like in the rainstorm and the family is just sitting around and eating noodles and putting ham in it and just hanging out while this rainstorm's going on. And it's just such a beautiful moment, and it feels so nostalgic and like something you would have done with your family during a rainstorm. It's just what I absolutely love about his movies and why, you know, he's one of my favorite directors. Number 10, The Wind Rises. So this is a fictionalized biographical film of Hiro Horikoshi. I think I nailed it. He was the designer of the Mitsubishi A5M fighter and its successor, the Mitsubishi A6M Zero, the Zero fighter, which is a famous Japanese fighter jet from World War II. And it was used by the Empire of Japan during World War II. And this film is about how he loves creating these flying machines and was developing them for Japan during the war. It's a very interesting film. It has a lot of beautiful dream sequences. The animation is like very, very high level. You can see, because this is the latest film that Miyazaki has made. There's one more that's coming out soon, which we'll talk about at the end, but is not available for Americans yet at the end. But this is a very interesting film because the animation, you can see the level that he's gotten to with his animation. There's a lot of really deep stuff in the movie because it has a lot to say about, you know, creation and what is the role of an artist or, you know, like an artisan in society and kind of how they get used by capitalism and by war and by kind of governments and these nefarious things where they're, I think Miyazaki's position is that the artist's position and the creator's position is a pure one that gets exploited. You know, that's a lot. There's a lot to this. This is a very difficult kind of topics and subjects. So this is a deep film. The reason that I put it on the bottom though is because as far as engagement goes, I think this film is by far the slowest of all of the films that I watched. In my opinion, it plays like a relatively standard biopic. It's just not as engaging as his other work. You know, I really did debate where to put this because I think there's a lot of deepness in this. You know, the idea of a man wanting to make airplanes simply for the love of flight and ending up creating these instruments of war is really explored very, very well. And I think it has a lot to say about artists and scientists and creatives. But in the end, the lack of the slowness of the film just puts this kind of near the bottom of the filmography for me. Number 9, Lupin III, The Castle of Castigliago. So this is the first film Miyazaki made before Studio Ghibli was a thing. The character of Lupin was an established manga character. He was like this French thief character, and Miyazaki added a little humanity and made him more of a hero character, which some fans of, I guess, of the series didn't like. I think this film has the opposite problem of The Wind Rises. Its animation and its themes are not as developed and as complex as you would expect because it's his first film, but it is immensely watchable. This movie flies by in runtime. It is like a James Bond movie, Mission Impossible movie. It's basically like an animated popcorn flick. It's really tight, and the concepts and the way that it moves are really fun. It's like this goofy thief getting into trouble. It's just like a great, really good movie. So I ended up putting this above The Wind Rises. I think you see hints of Miyazaki's later greatness. There is this interesting political implication that he puts in this movie. It gets a little deep about how, like, you know, money controls everything. Let's leave it at that. And, you know, we get a lot of the classic things that I talked about. His auteurism, the classic Miyazaki stumble is featured very prominently. Lupin is constantly falling over and tripping and sliding down things, which is, I love it, it's great. And the character design of these kind of unique fantasy characters is also there. The foot soldier kind of guard characters and their like metallic suits and their claws are super cool and weird looking. Just adds that flavor, that Miyazaki flavor to this film. Number 8, Porco Rosso. This plot revolves around an Italian World War I ex-fighter pilot who is now living as a freelance bounty hunter and chasing air pirates in the Adriatic Sea. He does have an unusual curse put on him, though, that turned him into an anthropomorphic pig. So he was once called Marco Rossellini, but he is now known as Porco Rosso, which is Italian for the red pig. So this is another film revolving around flight, and it's another thrilling adventure film. It's exciting like Indiana Jones or something similar. It's in a lot of ways a spoof on kind of like the old adventure films. And there is, of course, something very intentional, I believe, in making the hero a literal pig. I think there's a little bit something tongue-in-cheek that Miyazaki is trying to say about the way that we view our heroes. You know, we have them be these handsome, good-looking guys. What if we make him an actual pig man? As an adventure film goes, this is super entertaining. Again, I would say I would like a little bit more kind of thematic deepness to this and a more cultural critique, but it does have hints of the anti-war sentiment. Not hints, I mean, it does have strong anti-war sentiment that Miyazaki is famous for, and the line, better a pig than a fascist, is a pretty brilliant one that is inserted in this film. Another great, good message for people to watch and see, especially children. Number 7, Howl's Moving Castle. So this film is set in a fictional kingdom where magic and early 20th century technology is occurring while there is a war that is supposed to be happening between two kingdoms. And we have this character, Sophie, who is a young girl who is turned into an elderly woman by a witch, who then has to work with Howl, who is a wizard, to kind of help her become a girl again. And Howl is concerned with avoiding the war, basically. So this film was created in response to the Iraq War, and the allegory to that and the allegory to war in general is very obvious to see. It's another great anti-war film by Miyazaki. He uses fantasy and allegory pretty brilliantly. He builds an interesting world. You know, I think his world building capacity is so amazing that you can watch one of his films and immediately all of these crazy things are happening. You know, people are turning into old people and there's fire that talks and all this stuff. And you buy it because he's so good at creating this world where all these things exist. And he can introduce kind of anything in his films. I think that's what Howl shows, is that he can kind of introduce any element and you just want to go with it. That's what he's so good at. You do see a little bit of his nihilism at the end of this film, which shows how Miyazaki kind of does have a hopeful outlook. He's making these films that are ultimately hopeful in nature, but there is a pessimistic side to Miyazaki and his work that you can see in this in the end when the war ends, but bombers are flying to a new war. So I think in general, Miyazaki does believe that humans have a tendency towards conflict and war. Number 6, Castle in the Sky. So this film follows orphans Shita and Pazu, who are chased by this evil colonel, Nausicaa, the army, and these pirates. They're all trying to get Shita's crystal necklace. So they discover that the crystal leads them to Laputa. Funny little note about this is that the Spanish of this is, you know, what it would be. And it's because Miyazaki didn't know. He was kind of trying to do an homage to Gulliver's Travels, which utilized the name Laputa as a joke, basically. And Miyazaki didn't know that. He said later that if he had known that this was a swear word, he wouldn't have chosen that for the title of his magical kingdom in his children's movie. So it turns out that this kingdom that they're going to is also like a dangerous weapon system, which is why the Colonel Masuka wants it. So this is a great mix of adventure and, again, a cultural critique on the warring nature of man. We can see this thematic thing rising again in the things that Miyazaki wants to create and wants to say. I think that Muska is one of the more unambiguously evil antagonists. You know, his end goal is finding a weapon of destruction to take over the world with. And in the end, we see again Miyazaki's pessimism in that the castle ends up leaving man and they end up having to they end up undeserving of this great kingdom. You know, this is something that man cannot obtain because the tendency of man is to use these great, beautiful places if they have the application for destruction. Probably a nuclear bomb metaphor, an atomic bomb metaphor in here about how science, we end up creating these great things, and instead of using the science for good, we end up using it for destruction and instruments of war. The robots, for example, can be used to tend to a garden, but instead of doing that, we end up using these robots in this film to kill and destroy something that Miyazaki wants us to think about, which is why this is a good, great film. You know, I think the animation and particularly the flying are vintage, you know, Miyazaki. The musical score is one that I say matches perfectly with the action and the emotion of this film. Here you can really see how Miyazaki is a director who really understands how to use musical scores. He's a lot like an old Hollywood, old school director in that way. He uses these big kind of full scores to their potential. He doesn't allow them to wash out his work because his work is also so strong, his imagery is so strong, but he understands how to use these big musical scores to augment his work in a way that is really affecting. Number 5, Nausicaa, Valley of the Wind. So taking place in a post-nuclear futuristic world. So potentially after a nuclear war, this is the world that we're left with. The film tells the story of Nausicaa, who is a teenage princess of the Valley of the Wind. She becomes embroiled in a struggle with another kingdom that is trying to use an ancient weapon to eradicate a jungle full of giant mutant insects. So we have another environmentalist theme here, also anti-war. And it's very well fleshed out. It serves as a super positive message for children who might see it. I think this ending is more overtly hopeful, where we have, at the end of all of this conflict, we have new life sprouting in this toxic jungle that is supposed to be eradicated but is ended up being saved. I think we can see what a great fantasy director Miyazaki is through this film. You know, we can see him on par with, you know, Lord of the Rings, J.R.R. Tolkien kind of fantasy creator, creative type. Who's the guy that made Dune, whatever that guy's name is. The world building again is fantastic in this. You know, the giant worms is such a cool thing, cool image. And of course we have a brilliant score. This is the first time that Miyazaki worked with his longtime collaborator who does the scores for all of his films. And we see, of course, Miyazaki's tendency for very tight, very well-developed scripts and characters. Number 4, Princess Mononoke. So here we are in what I consider to be the upper tier. These last 4 films could honestly be all rearranged in any order, but I felt like having a 4-way tie is a little bit boring and not what you're here in this video for. So I tried my best to really think about how I would rank these last 4, but I just want to point out that in my opinion, the differences are so minuscule and so minimal that, you know, I really consider these last 4 to be 5-star perfect films almost. Number 4, Princess Mononoke. This story follows a young prince named Ashitaka, and he gets involved in a struggle between the gods, the kami, which are the animal forest gods, and the humans who are living on the outskirts in this place called Iron Town and are consuming resources and wanting to destroy the forest gods so that they can get the resources out of the forest, and also get the head of the forest spirit so that they can cure disease, because they believe that having the head of the forest spirit will end up curing disease and giving the emperor immortality. So this is, again, a very strong environmental message film. Miyazaki has a lot to say about humans' relationship with nature in this film. I think this is the movie that Avatar wishes that it was. No disrespect to you Avatar lovers out there, not my cup of tea, but this resonated more with me as an environmental film, a complex film about humans' relationship to the environment, capitalists' kind of negative effect on our ability to coexist with nature. You know, I think the commentary about the environmental damage that humans do to the world is so complex and nuanced in this film because it offers a sympathetic portrayal of Irontown and its creators and their desire to create a better, more egalitarian society. But it doesn't apologize for the humans. The destructive ways of the humans is not something that's supposed to be good, it's just something that's understandable. So Lady Oshi has her legitimate reasons for wanting to steal the head of the forest spirit. She wants to help a bunch of lepers. So I mean, like, it doesn't get more altruistic than that. She is a good person, but she's misguided. Even though that is the case, her destruction of nature and the way that she is going to destroy the forest is also portrayed as very unforgivable. It's just so complex and nuanced, and it makes you think a lot about our relationship and, like, is there a way to fix this problem that we are put in because of capitalism and the way that the world is? And that's what makes the main character of Ashitaka so relatable, because he is like us, kind of torn between being a human and wanting to help, you know, man exist in this space, but also wanting to preserve nature because he has a deep connection to it because of the way that he was brought up and considers in his values and stuff. And then you have Princess Mononoke, who is kind of the rebel who has a very clear idea about what the right thing to do is, which is to destroy humans, even though she is a human. So she becomes like this kind of like environmental terrorist in an interesting way. She's like the revolutionary character. You see the different politics that he has put in this film, like the revolutionary, the moderate, and the kind of, I would say, like the neo-liberal or neocon in Lady Oshi. I mean, this is maybe the most nihilistic of all of Miyazaki's work, and you can see that through the violence that he uses in it, because it's pretty jarring. It's not something you often see out of Miyazaki. The first time you see it after watching a lot of his films, then when you see the violence that shows up in this film, it's a little bit jarring and surprising, but it adds a real weight to this piece. I think that Miyazaki is really serious about what he's trying to say in this one, and using that violence really highlights that. And the ending of this is by no means a happy one. I think there's real commentary that he's trying to make about how revolutionaries cannot get along with moderates, and he is not sure where he lies in that. I think he doesn't know what the right path is, and I think he doesn't have a lot of hope for what the right thing to do is, because it's so hard to figure out what the right thing to do is. You know, he doesn't know if we should be a revolutionary like Princess Mononoke, or if we should be a moderate like Ashitaka. You know, and because of the fact that we don't have a clear path, what ends up happening is things end up getting destroyed and maybe not being able to be fixed. Although there is like a little inkling of hope with them wanting to rebuild the town more at tune with nature, and you know, they have a line about how the spirit's not really dead, stuff like that. But yeah, I think it's a little bit of a sad kind of thing that he's working through. He has sad feelings about the way the world is. On the technical side, this movie is fantastic. You know, the fantasy, the character animations, the design, all that stuff is at peak here. You know, this very well could be best film, but I put it at number 4 because I think number 3, Kiki's Delivery Service, is more interesting to me. This film might be my personal favorite. I don't think many people could understand if I put this film in first, although I really kind of wanted to, because it spoke so personally to me. But I recognize that it's more of a personal thing than actually being like maybe the best, but it's such a good film. So this story follows Kiki, who is a young witch, and she moves to a new town and has to use her flying abilities to earn a living. Simple, that's all it's about. It's a really simple story. Unlike Princess Mononoke, the stakes are pretty low. It's not about saving the world, it's just about a young witch going out on her own for the first time and learning to navigate in the world. It is, however, a very beautiful commentary on life and about how going out on your own as a young person for the first time, and how you have to handle a lot of things, and how it can be pretty scary and kind of depressing and sad sometimes. For me, the thing that really resonated is the commentary on capitalism and creating art and how difficult that balance is to strike when you're an artist. One of my favorite story beats in all of cinema happens in this, and that is how through utilizing her flying power for work, Kiki actually loses the joy of her magic and therefore can no longer perform her magic. You know, it's so relatable to any artist or anyone really who is trying to make a living pursuing their passion, and how difficult it is to try to keep that joy that inspired us to want to do this work. But the realities of day-to-day life are that the fun, it gets kind of sucked out of this stuff. I think there's a lot to be said about the soul-crushing nature of work in this, which is a very, heavy kind of thing to think about. Something I haven't spoken about yet, though, is how Miyazaki presents his female characters. I think it's pretty clear this film has a great portrayal of a female character. If me, as like a 30-year-old man, can call Kiki's Delivery Service one of my favorite films, and I find so much relatable in it to the character of Kiki. I think it just shows how much of a fleshed out person Miyazaki creates through his work in a way that a lot of people don't know how to do. So, number 2, Spirited Away. This will certainly be most people's number 1, and upon rewatch, I was really this close to putting it as my number 1 as well. But I decided to put it here. Spirited Away tells the story of Chichiro, although she forgets her name and becomes Sen in the movie, who is a 10-year-old girl who's moving to a new neighborhood, and she enters the world of the kami, the spirits in Japanese folklore. After her parents are turned into pigs by a witch, Chichiro takes a job working in the bathhouse and tries to find a way to free herself and her parents to return back to the human world. This film is in a lot of ways an extension of the themes in Kiki's Delivery Service. We have this idea of this girl who has to go out on her own and make it in this cold capitalist world. There are higher stakes in this film than in Kiki's Delivery Service, and there are also a lot more interesting fantasy allegories. This film has so many beautiful characters, wonderful, cool, weird things that happen in it, and I think it's just a perfect mix of fairy tale and kind of arty surrealism. So he uses fairy tale to create something that is very surreal and arty and artistic, but by using fairy tale, he hits that sweet spot of being unique, but also having mass appeal. So I think audiences are able to accept kind of these weird, goofy things that are happening, a giant baby, whatever, what have you, walking lamps, things like that, because of its fairy tale setting. And so this film has a huge mass appeal. I mean, everybody knows this film. Almost everybody who sees this film loves this film. In technical execution, I think if there is a word for better than perfect, it applies to this movie. The character designs, the mannerisms, they're just so endearing and so fun. I'm just thinking of the time when they smell the stinky river spirit, and like the face of the characters and the way they do it and like the way they walk around. It's just so endearing and so fun. The Miyazaki trips in this movie are pretty much my favorite thing ever. Sen or Chichiro falling down the stairs is so funny. The score, perfectly used. It's haunting, it's nostalgic, it's emotional. You have comedy, you have adventure, and again, very relatable, strong female character that is rare in cinema. So yeah, I mean, this film is as close to perfect film that you can make, but I didn't put it as my number 1 because I put My Neighbor Totoro as number 1. Now, some people are going to be appalled by this. People are, how could you put My Neighbor Totoro above Spirited Away? But for me, I think aesthetically, I have to put this simple piece first because I appreciate so much what it does and what it represents in cinema. It's not flashy. It's about simple slice of life moments. It's just a story of a young professor. It's just a story of a professor and his 2 daughters who move to the country while their mother is sick, and about their interactions with these friendly wood spirits. It's just these little nostalgic moments of life, these experiences like moving to a new home for the first time, huddling in a rainstorm, the fear that you get of losing a sibling. And the story does hint at kind of these grand, serious story beats. The idea that May maybe drowns or that the mother is gravely ill. But ultimately, you know, it steers away from making big statements about that, because this film is, at its essence, a simple story about the way that children see the world and how they interact with nature and how we can interact with nature and how beautiful that experience is. You know, I just have to put this as a number one because I think this is just the type of cinema that I believe we need more of. Simple stuff that is beautiful and fantastical, but also just, you know, very sweet and nice. And it's the type of children's film that we need more of. So that's why I put it at number one. Although, like I said, those top four, mix those around, mess them around, they all are great. So yeah, I think every film on this list is worth watching. My recommend is to go from my number one down. If you're new to Miyazaki, you haven't seen any, start at number one, work your way down. And if you like it, you know, you can keep going deeper, deeper, deeper. And you'll see a lot of great movies. He's definitely a director worth watching every film in his filmography. He is on my short list for greatest directors of all time. And so yeah, definitely check out his work if you haven't. Let me know if you are a Miyazaki head what your order is. Let me know in the comments. Also, I don't need to tell you what to do. Like, share, subscribe. You know, watch this video a couple times. Tell your friends. All right, thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you next time.